Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Living in Switzerland. The series is brought to you by Reilly. We are a staffing and project services company based in Zurich. If you or anyone you know of is looking for a new role in Switzerland, or if you're looking to hire, let us know. We'd be happy to help. The best way to do that is by going to rigby.ch/apply and filling out the form. Then, if we have anything that might be of interest, we'll gladly let you know. Today, we will be speaking about how expats can build up a social network in Switzerland. We are joined by James Macsay and Margaret Reilly Baer. They are both connected to the American International Club Zurich, a supportive network of friends and colleagues not only to American expats, but expats of all nationalities living in Zurich. James is the former president of the AICZ. He is currently on the board of the Association of American Clubs, which is responsible for American clubs in Switzerland and all around the world. He is a communication professional married to a Swiss for many years. He works in corporate settings and as a communication consultant/facilitator, and also hosted a radio show in Zurich many moons ago. Margaret is the current president of the AICZ. Originally from New York City, she has over 40 years of experience as an international event professional with institutions including the Metropolitan Opera, the School of American Ballet at Lincoln Center, and the Whitney Museum of American Art. She is also married to a Swiss and recently retired from UBS after 21 years. James and Margaret, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Catherine.
So why don't we start with you, Margaret? Tell us maybe a little bit about where you're from and why and when you came to Switzerland.
Well, I'm from New York City originally, and I'm married to a Swiss, so I came to Switzerland actually after opening the New York Times over the coffee cup in New York one day, and it said $99 round trip to Zurich. And I decided to splurge, and we went for a long weekend to Zurich to see my husband's mother. And that was a while ago now. That's almost 26 years ago. He was at Oracle at the time, and he went in to say hello to the people in the Oracle office here in Zurich, and they offered him a job. So we originally thought, oh, we'll do the Europe thing for 2 or 3 years. Won't that be fun? And then we got here, and other things happened, and I ended up getting a job that I really liked, and here we are today.
And in terms of socializing, how and why did you get involved in the expat community?
Well, as a woman, well, no, actually, this happens to spouses of both on both sides. When you come to any country other than where you're from, and you have a career, I sort of fell into a black hole because suddenly no one knew me, no one knew what I did. I was late 30s when I got here, so I had already a nice career in the United States. And then you get here and you're basically the wife of or the husband of, and it's a bit disorienting. And so the American International Club, I joined it because they were not only a club, they were a club for families as well as professionals, and that was very important to me because obviously I was looking for a job, and it was because of them that I ended up going to, for example, the professional women's group. And there I was president for a few years. And one of the women on the executive committee, the treasurer, who I think, James, you know, Lisa Sennhauser Kelly.
Yes.
She was the treasurer. And at one point she said to me, would you ever consider going back inside? And I said, well, it would depend on the job. And she worked for UBS at the time. And she put me in touch with this person who was looking for an event professional in cultural sponsorship and events. And that was 21 years ago, or well, 22 years now. And I enjoyed the job so much, we ended up staying here.
Great. And I think you've already kind of covered this, but aside from socializing, what are the other benefits of joining an expat group? So you mentioned obviously building up some professional contacts. Is there anything else?
I think one of the biggest things is being around like-minded people, because when you become an expat, regardless of where you're from, doesn't matter, you know, not necessarily just America, your horizon suddenly is much broader than it ever was. And you're not the same person that left, in my case, New York. And to be around other people who have gone through that and understand what it's like. And that's the nice thing about the AICZ. For example, we're not all Americans. We're, people from all countries. And a lot of our members are also Swiss who lived outside of Switzerland for a long time and now are no longer just Swiss.
Kind of like me.
Exactly. You're not
That's
just a
kind of,
Swiss
yeah.
anymore. You have a broader horizon now. You've lived in other places. You have different ideas of what is correct and not correct. Oh, there goes my
That's right.
clock.
Oh,
Just
great.
like a
All right.
Swiss timing, Margaret. Perfect.
Speaking of Switzerland, that would be a Swiss clock you're hearing.
That's it. And it's a good place to switch now to James. So, James, maybe you can tell us a little bit about where you're from and why you
Okay.
came to Switzerland.
Going to give you the short version of the story here. I am Swiss now. I became Swiss. I'm originally from the Detroit, Michigan area in the United States. And my story, it's a long one, but the short story is that the summer many moons ago, 1985, before the internet was invented, I took a trip first time in Europe. We called it a Let's Go Europe trip with a backpack and a book about Europe. And I was started in England, and I met a Swiss lady who's now my wife. We met at a historic and a respectable tavern in Oxford and had a great time. And she gave me her address, wrote it down on a piece of paper and said, when you come through Switzerland, look me up and maybe you can come visit with our family. And so we did that. And then we had some time to get to know each other a bit more. But then I went back to the States. Long story short, we had like about a 2-year sort of courtship time. And then we decided, let's get married. And then I came to Switzerland. That was back in the late 80s. And so that was the main reason, Cupid's arrow. And I had no idea that I would ever come to Switzerland growing up as a young person in the U.S., but it just happened. So that's good. And I'm still here. A lot of challenges, good times. Also, there's as with life anywhere, U.S. or Switzerland, there's always things that sometimes don't go the way you want, but you go through them and it works. So
that's right.
And then I basically got involved in the expat community when I arrived. I didn't have a job yet. My wife was studying, and so I started networking. And she had been sending out applications for me to different companies. And then somebody told me, "Oh, there's the American Club in Zurich. Maybe you want to check that out." And so that was my first contact with the American. We were called the American Club of Zurich at the time. And we had a happy hour, which we still do. We call it Thank Goodness It's Friday, TGIF. It was at the Eden Olach Hotel, which is now, I think it's called La Réserve here in Zurich. But that was many years ago. But the tradition continues every Friday, third Friday of each month, people get together. And through that event, I started meeting Americans. I met one person who I kept in contact with since then, and he moved back to Michigan, and I see him every time I go back to Michigan. I indirectly had sort of through networking, somebody introduced me to someone at General Motors who was a vice president of sales at the time, and I had applied for a junior market research role, and I was able to connect with this person, and indirectly that person introduced me to someone else in marketing, and that helped me to land my first job in Switzerland. So hats off to the club for that. I think that's, I guess, one of the reasons that I got involved with the club. And I think for anyone listening, whether you're registered at Rigby AG looking for your next IT service role or whatever you're looking for, we're a great community to meet people, connect with, and for opportunities, but also socializing. Also, I would say, as Margaret mentioned, the sort of empathy people, a lot of us are from, whether it's US or other countries, and we're all here kind of between worlds. We're not Veda Fictional Fogel. We're not really
That's
Swiss.
Right.
We don't really belong back where we came from. And so, but there's certain, a community of people. This is life, and we're here now. And so we enjoy it. So
great. So you'd also
And
say the main.
If I could add to that, James, I think what's important too with the club, I'm sure you'll agree, is that there's this openness and candidness that is native to some degree to North America. And I think that the club takes that and runs with it, and people enjoy that feeling when they come in that they can talk to anybody. You can just walk up and chat with someone.
yeah, it is that sort of I don't know if it's a stereotypical thing, but if you go to the US, and, hey, how are you doing? And people are interested. Okay, there's another side of that where it's sometimes a little bit, people think it's superficial, but I think the spirit, as Margaret says, we're very open and people are interested and curious. And it's, I think it's sincere too. The people who show up, at least,
Mhm.
relationships can start there or connections and things. So, yeah.
Sounds great. Yeah. I'm looking forward to actually going to the club also because
We're
I'm
going
going
to
to the
get you
1st
out in
of August.
July or August, hopefully. Yeah.
That's
Oh,
right,
yeah,
the
we have to
1st of
get you
August
doing
event.
TGIF.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, so let's talk maybe a little bit more generally about socializing in Switzerland. So people sometimes say that socializing in Switzerland can be tougher than in other countries. Why do you think they say this? And do you think there's any truth to it?
Margaret, you want to go first?
Well, on one hand, I think that's true. And on another hand, having been here a little while, I start to think it's not so true. And I'll explain why. Understandably, Americans are very outgoing. We tend to speak to each other, and you'll be standing on a street corner in New York, and something will happen, and the person next to you will turn and start talking about it to you. It's very common. Whereas in Switzerland, it's not quite done. The Swiss are very polite, and it's a much smaller country, so boundaries in general are a bit more important. In America, it's such a big place that people tend to talk to each other because that's just what we do. And I think, like I said, I think the Swiss, what do you think, James? I think the Swiss are polite, and I found actually that when they hear you speaking German with an accent, they tend to speak to you. They give you, how shall I say, they realize, like, oh, she's not Swiss, okay, and then they start talking to you. Which is kind of nice, actually, because it's as if they give you credit for not having the same mores as they have. and
Yeah.
then and you make friends that way too, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. If I think back when I first came here too, if in social settings, the language can, if you don't know any German or Schweizerdeutsch, then you have to start in English or whatever language you're speaking. And it works because usually I found that the Swiss would often, even if you tried, Guten Tag or the Wie geht es Ihnen, and then they would like to shift over to English because their English skills are usually pretty good. But that would be maybe one tip for newcomers to try, as Margaret mentioned, to learn a little bit, or at least to show you're making an effort, and then it sets the ground for, I think, a good exchange or an openness, and you show a little vulnerability, but also that you're trying to adjust to the local culture, and that is appreciated, I think, from the Swiss, and I think that helps to kind of break that surface level sort of distance and discreet and standoff feeling that we sometimes get when we're
Well, and the Swiss is so multiculti that they enjoy having having the chance to speak English, and that's sometimes. I know at one point I got kind of annoyed because I thought, well, I don't care if they're speaking English to me. I'm going to keep speaking German because I needed the practice. And actually, most people were fine with that. I'd say something in German, they'd answer me in English. I'd say something again, back to them in German. They'd say something in English, and this went on for a little while, and it was
yeah, or if
fine.
they'll be
Everybody was
happy.
happy.
I was in, yeah, they'll start into talk about vacations in the U.S. Maybe in our case, oh yes, I was in the Grand Canyon and we did Death Valley and the Las Vegas. And
Oh yeah, yeah.
so you'll quickly,
Yeah, the Swiss are well traveled.
yeah, they get around, and so there's usually some, rapport you can connect with, and depending on where they've traveled to, and yeah, also to show your knowledge of Switzerland or places you've been is a good thing to do too.
So if someone is struggling, they've moved here maybe, and they're struggling to find a community, to find friends, or just someone to socialize with at the weekend maybe, what tips would you give them? Obviously, you said learning the language, that's a really good start. But in terms of making deeper connections that maybe last a bit longer, what would you suggest?
Well, I think definitely join these clubs that exist. And James, you can speak more to that. The Association of American Clubs, regardless of what country you're in, you're going to find some sort of a club that will help you. We're lucky here in Zurich. We have not only the American International Club, which is us, but we also have the American Women's Club. We have Zurich International Women's Association. We have the PWG, the Professional Women's Group, and definitely get involved in that. The second thing that made a huge difference to me in making friends was if you like a sport, get into it, get into a club. If you're a golfer, go golfing. You'll meet the Swiss golfing. If I was I am a rider, and a friend of mine shortly after I got here, a Swiss friend said, "We need to get you a horse." And I thought, "Well, I beg your pardon?" And sure enough, she got me a share in a horse. And it made a huge difference in how happy I was. And it's like I come from a family of marathon runners. If you're a runner and you run around the neighborhood, you're going to meet all the other runners. You're going to know all of them by the time, a month in, you'll easily know them all. And especially, there's always, well, it's called Vereine in German. There are also associations and clubs for different sports in Switzerland. So definitely get involved because you'll find like-minded people there, and that's a real pleasure.
And
Yeah,
you
that's a great
also
tip.
have a dog, Margaret. That's another
Oh,
site.
that's another.
Get a dog. Go out for a
That's
walk on the
Oh yeah.
Wanderweg.
Oh, you definitely meet the neighbors with the dog. Yes, and all the other dog walkers.
Yeah. All good points. No, I think, yeah, aside from coming out to one of our American International Club of Zurich's happy hours and maybe becoming a member of the club, I find I go to other events too. I often get events. There's a group, maybe like Zurich Networking Group, or I'll even go, yeah, like International Women's Day. I was invited to something at the Kunsthaus. So there's often you'll see opportunities to get out and listen to a talk somewhere, an event where there's maybe, or it's a vernissage, or it's a little gallery showing of some artwork. If you get chances to do that, or some friends invite you, or just go online and see what's happening in Zurich, just show up there and see what's going on, and you'll usually meet somebody, or especially if you're interested in art or if you're into nature. Walking groups, I think, is another one, as Margaret
Mm.
pointed out. Swimming, whatever your hobby sports are, just find something you enjoy, and you're going to find others. And whether there's people from Switzerland or other countries, you'll meet them.
Right. And Margaret, I know you had some personal experience with something you call it the honeymoon period. So can you maybe talk a little bit
Is
about
it
that?
over?
It's funny, and that is not my term. That is, I forget where I heard it. It's some sort of it was at some sort of a lecture or a speech given by someone, and he referred to the honeymoon period. And it's true because you get here and you want to fit in and you make every effort and you're learning German and you're eating cheese and you're learning about the Alps and the Swiss always amaze me. They all
Swiss
know, of
wine.
course, right, Swiss wine, but they know the name of every Alp, which always amazes me. They'll look in the distance and they all look like mountains to me. Of course, I come from New York, so I guess were they skyscrapers, it would be a little easier. But they look in the distance and they're saying, "Oh yes, and that would be the Rigi, and that would be the this, and that would be the oh, and there's Kleine Scheidecker or whatever it is." And when you first come, and I went through this, they say that when you first get here, after a period of a little while, you start to almost become more Swiss than the Swiss because you want to fit in. So you want to learn this, and and I'm going to speak German, and I'm going to take trams, and I'm going to, and after a while, you
All that.
so you sort of go back to normal, luckily. But there is that period where, you know, and I thought it was very funny, the honeymoon period being more Swiss than the Swiss, because you definitely do. I see people doing that. And I think it's good because you need to jump in to the cold water and start splashing around and you'll eventually learn to swim.
That's right. And yes, just showing, as you said before, also just showing an interest, making an effort is really important to
Mm,
the Swiss as well.
exactly. Yeah, and they see you doing that.
That's right. Do you have anything else you'd like to share about your personal experience when you first came here?
Well, I think one thing is, yeah, just sort of be sort of open to different experiences that you're having without judging too much. And one real quick story, I remember it was winter, cold. It was the first winter here, and I drove my wife up to the local Migros shopping store, and I just dropped her off at the front door and said, "I'll wait outside for you and just go do the shopping." And so I just kind of put the car into a parking space, but I left the engine running on the car.
Oh,
I think you know where I'm
Uh-oh.
going with this. So I was barely there, I don't know, 10, 20 seconds. And next thing I know, someone comes up and they're knocking on the window of my car. And I said, well, what's going on now? And then it was some person who happened to be, I think, a little bit slightly older female. And I rolled the window down. And he goes, yeah, Sie sollten das nicht machen, or turn off your car. You shouldn't be letting the engine run. So it was, I said, oh, yeah, of course. I should have realized that. But where I'm from in Michigan, and Margaret might know that too from being these cold states, that's typical American behavior. Leave your car running so you stay warm. And Switzerland, it's bad for the environment. You're wasting fuel. So, these values around efficiency and nature and, protecting the environment for others. So yeah, you'll get little, how do you say, awakenings or little teachings. And
Awakenings.
We like to, not control each other. We like to remind each other of the rules. So if somebody reminds you to do something, you're putting your trash out incorrectly, or you're leaving your shoes out in the in front of your the gang or the lobby space in front of your apartment, keep that place orderly, put things away. And so little things like that. I'm not saying it's like that everywhere, but there's a tendency for those cultural
Well,
norms,
the flip
right?
side of that, though, James, you'll appreciate this. So Adrian and I lived in New York for many years. Well, for a couple of years when we were first married before moving here. And we happened to be out in Long Island waiting for somebody to arrive on the jitney, on the bus. And we're sitting there. And there's a guy sitting next to us who's also sitting there waiting for the bus, and his engine is running. And doesn't my dear husband, my Swiss husband, rolls down the window, signals to him. The guy rolls down his window, and my husband says to him, your engine is running. And he looked at him like, thank you, Mr. Martian.
Thanks, dude. I got to get going here.
So there's two sides to, you see, so the Swiss go through the same thing when they come to America or to another country. They also have situations where they can't help their Swissness.
That's right. Yes.
Just like Americans can't help their Americanness, or the Italians are always Italian and the Spanish are always Spanish, and.
That's right. So,
but it's one of the lovely things about traveling around the world.
Yeah, and you too, Catherine. Like you go, Swiss woman going to the UK. I'm sure there's certain things. All of a sudden, I can let go of that old rule and now I don't know how you find that, like in the UK.
For sure, yeah, everything's open on Sundays. It's so strange.
Ah.
I don't know why all the shops are open. So, yeah, that's something to get used to. But let's move on to one more question about socializing in general. So, interacting with expats and other people in a similar situation is maybe not so hard in Switzerland because there are all these clubs and opportunities. But what about meeting the locals? Can you maybe give us one or two tips about how you would go about meeting locals?
Well, I definitely think sport, like we mentioned. My dog walking, certainly, everybody in the neighborhood who has a dog.
That's a good one.
Locals. And it is when, they have, not similar to the States, they have what we would call, I guess, in the States, a farmer's market. They have green markets.
Oh, yes.
And definitely go to those, chat with people. And like I said, they'll hear that you're not Swiss or, not a native. And so people do give you credit for that and are very helpful and very kind, usually.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, right. We have a couple of these sort of urban garden boxes, but it's outside in a certain area. And that's always a good chance someone's watering the plants, or there's, again, this common interest in something. And so that gives you a good chance to connect with others, or in your apartment or your community. If there's what they call a Wohngemeinschaft, or a people who come together, that's, even though you may not understand everything they're talking about, it's always nice to be present there, and it shows that you're part of the community, so that helps. And if you're young and you enjoy getting out, Zurich's got a great nightlife, all kind of clubs and places you can go dancing or partying and having a good time, or cultural events. So again, no matter what country you're from, you're going to find people who are interested in your culture and enjoy music together, or whatever it is that you're doing.
And it's the same for other cities as well. For example, Lausanne is well known also for its nightlife. So many other cities, no matter where you settle in Switzerland, you'll still have those opportunities. Obviously, Zurich is the biggest, but Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good country for that, and there's a lot of offers no matter what region you're in. And I think the nightlife transcends cultural rules and stereotypes and things.
Well, and
And
our TGIFs are very popular, and that's why,
Yeah,
because
let's get them
Switzerland
out
does not,
back.
as such, have a pub culture where you walk in, you sit down, you don't know anybody, and you end up chatting with with people. You don't find that as often in Switzerland as you might say in the UK. It's very prominent in Ireland. In New York, you can walk into a bar, the TV set is on, and somebody's bound to make a comment to you about, I don't know, whatever ball game's on the TV, and you end up chatting with people, and then you leave, you never see them again. But that's, it's nice to have that contact with people and sort of non-committal
Yeah.
contact.
that's right. And I think that's where maybe people mean when they say it's hard to socialize in Switzerland, because non-committal contact isn't very common. It's all either you're
Mm,
friends with someone or you don't really interact with them very much.
mm.
Entweder
So
oder. One or the other, right? That's true.
that's right. So
Yeah.
let's move on and talk a little bit about AICZ specifically. So do you want to just tell me a little bit, or tell the listeners a little bit about the organization in general?
Mhm. Yeah, I think.
James, would
Well,
you?
I mean, just well, first of all, Margaret. Well, Margaret is our new president. I stepped back from the role and transferred the I say the handed over the flame to Margaret after doing my 2
Or the
years.
scepter?
Right. Anyways, but the club itself has been around since 1957, and it's always been there for friends, fellowship, or coming together, and yeah, being sort of an integration spot for Americans, but also for people who have interest in the American spirit to connect here in Switzerland. So, yeah, and Margaret, you're our new president. Maybe you want to add a few things that you're excited about stepping into that role.
Well, I think what I like about the club is that you don't have to be American. It's based on, I mean, obviously we have a lot of Americans or people who have lived in America. There are a lot of people who work for American companies, and therefore, it's a big help to have somebody you can talk about and ask questions of how things run and how things work. But also, like I said, we have Swiss people who work for whatever reason in other countries and then came back and enjoy being around other people with fairly broad horizons in their how they look at things. It's interesting too. I think we take advantage, and that's what I like. We take advantage of the openness that is an American trait. Openness in the sense of, if you're having fun and you can chat with someone, like the TGIS, if you're having fun, you can stay 4 hours. If you're not having fun, you can talk to one, two people, have a drink, leave. Nobody be insulted. Nobody, it's up to you. And that's very nice. And it's also nice to have, there's bound to be somebody, and I always say this, there's somebody in the room that you'll enjoy talking to.
Yeah.
You just have to find them,
Right.
and they may find you, which is nice too. And it's nice to be around like-minded, open-minded, friendly people. And I think that's very important when you come to another country, because you need the support and the camaraderie that will help you find your place and make your life, and.
It's probably also good to know, to add on to that, Margaret, that the club itself doesn't have any like commercial or political affiliations. So sometimes people
Yes.
come out and they want to hear about the Democrats or the Republicans or what's going on. So, people will have their own opinions, but there's no particular stance. So
Yeah.
we're objective and apolitical, really. So there's no, basically, it's a not-for-profit service organization, or like a Verein.
And
Oh,
are
yeah, we
these
don't have any political associations, and that's
Yeah,
very important.
we do a good job to keep events so they're not, if we have speakers that or things that are not charged in one way, or politically, or cultural, religious themes, nothing like that. People may talk about that on their own at the happy hour in their own way, but we're not promoting anything
and
like
is that, or are these factors reasons why you chose this club, or did you just sort of happen upon it by chance?
I think for me, I didn't really think about it. I kind of not assumed that it would be like that. So I think maybe that's, again, sort of the American values, and the U.S. people can be quite polarized and opinionated. At the same time, people in general will respect each other in such an environment and not
That's
uh,
right. Yeah.
impose others or bring in their own try
Well,
to hijack an event for their own purposes.
and the funny thing is, and now you reminded me, when I first came here, I didn't want to be around Americans too much because I was afraid it would keep me from learning German. It would keep me too rooted on the other side of the Atlantic. And so I purposely didn't hang out too much. That was the honeymoon, be more Swiss than the Swiss period, I think a little bit. But the funny thing that, and this is why I enjoy living abroad, actually, things like this. I had a Thanksgiving dinner shortly after I came, and I invited a couple of the neighbors. And so we had, which is not that usual, I guess, in Switzerland. Oh, we had maybe 14 people around the table, 14, 16 people. I have a large table that you can put leaves into, and it'll hold up to 18 people. And Thanksgiving is known for getting everyone together. And aside from, well, it was interesting too. I couldn't find I had to get 3 or 4 turkeys because my oven wasn't big enough to fit what I considered a proper Thanksgiving turkey. So that was fun because some of the neighbors helped to cook. And one of the things that I found interesting, though, and this is a bit of a difference, or it was at that point in America and Switzerland, and that was afterwards. One of the neighbors said, "Oh, Margaret, I was sitting next to, I forget what his name was, Valti. I was sitting next to Valti, and we don't agree on the parking issue in the town right now. But we didn't bring it up because I would never do that to a lovely dinner party like yours." And I said to her, "Why didn't you bring it up? This is the perfect chance over a glass of wine to have a good. I said, nothing like a good argument to make to make a dinner party interesting. And that's a very different way between how the Swiss see it and the Americans see it. I was saying to myself, in America, you have a good fight across across the dessert tray, and then everybody's still friends when you leave. You say, James, I think you're full of baloney, and would you like another glass of wine?
Oh, Margaret,
you
sounds
know,
good. Bitteschön.
where and nobody takes it as rude to have started a discussion, an active discussion at the dinner table. Let's put it that way. And I found that very interesting. And I thought, oh, that is a difference. I'll have to remember that if I go to someone else's house for dinner, because in an American household, yes, you can have a big chat about something that not everybody agrees on, and it's no big deal. Whereas here it was seen as disrupting a lovely event.
Right. So another cultural difference maybe to keep in
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the events. So I know that the club offers a balance of Swiss and American events. So tell me, for example, if someone wants to join, what can they expect?
Well, we have as we mentioned, the thank goodness it's Friday TGIF events, third Friday of every month. So that's kind of usually the entry point where people have the first contact with us, and you can meet Margaret there, other members from our executive committee, people who come maybe for the first time, others who are longtime members or frequently attending the event. And then after that, people might say, "Boy, this was fun," and what's coming up next? And then we might say, "Well, we just had a great 4th of July party." Margaret can tell you more about that. That's the bigger events. We do Thanksgiving dinner, which a lot of people know about as American tradition. The Swiss side, we've got a farmer's brunch, right? Margaret, coming up August 1st. So
Yes.
you celebrate. Okay, 1st of August, recognize that day. We have a nice location. That one is out in the countryside, Unterlunkhofen, Switzerland. But it's, we organize it, and there's a big, nice farmer's brunch available. And the last thing in August, we're doing a golf day in Oettelfingen. So if anyone's into golf,
Oh, yes. That's a new one.
yeah,
Well,
you're new
a
to it.
revised one. Yeah.
We might even do an opera golf for those who don't want to golf but want to join the opera golf, opera ski golf. But that's coming up. So, and you can go on the website and find all about that. It's the AICZ.ch/events. Margaret, do you want to add something about? We had this great 4th of July party out at the lakeside in Zurich, right down by the lake.
Yeah, and it was great because the lakeside, as you know, is pretty much, well, in the heart of Switzerland. of Switzerland, of Zurich. And so it was great because people who were working that day, it happened to fall on a Tuesday. So people who were working could easily get there. So that was nice. And we had a good crowd. We had over 100 people, and it was a nice mixed crowd. There were some kids there. We had a very lovely rendition of the Star Spangled Banner by a gentleman from the Zurich Opera, Shane Davidson, and he's American and has been here again. He's been here since 1991, I think he said. But that got me started, of course, thinking, oh, maybe we should have some opera outings because I like opera. And more than one person said, oh, count me in. And the other thing that we're thinking about doing now is getting a young professionals group started. So if anyone listening is interested in that sort of thing, for networking, for having talks by various professionals and experts on different subjects. So yeah, there's a lot going on. And it's all on our website, AICZ.ch. And look it up. We'd love to have you. And again, you can also come as a non-member to events. We'd love to see you. You can, it's nice because then you can come to a few events. You can test the waters, see if you're happy, see if you think this is a group for you, if you enjoy it. And yeah, we're always happy to see new faces.
Right, perfect. Yeah, so I'll definitely join your next event. Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And listeners can also look out for a summary of that on the blog, where I'm going to publish that and just tell you a little bit about my experience. Maybe as a last thing to cover is just for those listeners who are not looking to settle in Zurich, maybe who are interested in another part of Switzerland, it's important to emphasize that these clubs exist all over the country, don't they? So do any of you have anything to say about that, about clubs in other parts?
Yeah, I think we referenced it earlier. It's called the Association of American Clubs. And this is something over the last, it existed some years ago, and then now there's been a resurgence to bring together, let's say, our club in Zurich. There's one in Geneva. Lucerne has one. And then if you go around Europe, Lisbon has a big club. Berlin, we have people. Barcelona. And so what we're doing, we're trying to bring together those clubs. So like if you're going to travel to those areas and you need a contact or you'd like to reach out through the American community, that you could do that. So it's getting better. It's coming together, but we're all doing this on sort of a volunteer basis. So it just takes time to really follow up and get work done and make sure that websites are running and people know what's out there. So, but that is another one. Good question, Catherine. Thank you.
All right. Well, so that's it for today. So thanks once again to James and Margaret for joining us and to you for listening. We'll include links in the show notes to our guest and to further materials about some of the topics that we've spoken about today. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Once again, this podcast was brought to you by Rigby. We're a staffing and project services company here in Zurich. If you would like our help either to hire or to be hired, let us know. Best way to do that is by going to rigby.ch/apply and filling out the form. You can also sign up for our newsletter at rigby.ch/newsletter to receive our Living in Switzerland guide. We'll send you one email per month about expat-focused news and jobs in Switzerland. So thanks, and until the next time.